Hello and welcome to this video, which will be on the design of Ratchet Clank. The game I've been playing most recently that I've got the video footage from is Crack in Time, but obviously since it's a game in a series which has games released pretty much every year, this talk will deal with most of them. The things will apply generally. Obviously the first couple of games were more action platformer games, while as the series have progressed, they have basically become more action. The Deadlocked game, for instance, is nearly no platforming or mini games, while the Crack in Time has quite a bit of both jumping as well as quite a few mini games, which I will get to when I get there, basically. So the first thing that is, I'm just going to shut down some windows here. The first thing that happens when you come into the game, it's actually, whoops, I didn't have the video aligned here. Something like this. So you basically start off playing as Clank, which is the robot. This is mostly a tutorial. It basically shows you how to move, how to jump, and how to fight. And while you're doing this, you're basically invulnerable. There are a few small enemies, but I think this tends to be pretty good, actually, because you're basically playing a smaller version of the game where the enemies are less scary. Instead of just having weaker enemies in your game, you're playing as a different character entirely, which I think is a pretty cool touch, actually. What they're also doing is setting the sort of general theme with the game, as you can see here. So time puzzles and time interaction with objects is basically the idea of this Crack in Time game. So they basically start off with these sort of platforming puzzles which rely on time and things breaking to show you what's going on. And there are also a bunch of cool things happening, like you can see enemies flying around and shooting at you, or shooting over your head. I don't think they can actually do damage to you, but you basically get a sense of the enemies and what you will be facing later in the game at a really early stage. And they do it without having the sort of general idea of giving you abilities at the beginning and then taking everything away to make sure that you have to fight the weak enemies again. And it also basically shows off the bad guys, because the first thing that happens is there's an unskippable cutscene, which is a crime in itself, showing you the bad guys. And then what happens is there's the power goes out, and then you basically start running in this great clock area. Another thing I thought I'd mention at the first part here before we get on to Ratchet is, it obviously shows up really badly on these platforms here, but the drop shadow is, it always is straight below you. And without it, the platforming segments in pretty much all the Ratchet and Clank games would be horrible. Basically, the only thing that makes sure that you're able to land on a platform that's really far below you is the drop shadow. So yeah, it's only visible on the actual ground and not the blue ones. So I had a bit of a bad example there, but it basically makes the game. So this is the next part, where you play as Ratchet instead. And the beginning part here, you will also have Captain Quark with you. And he basically helps you with fighting, even though you'll have to do this sort of pulling the crank to raise the bridge and let him come across. It's another pretty clever mechanic that eases your path into the game. Because it makes the fighting even easier. So yeah, you have your basic moves. You have a jump, you have a double jump, which adds a little bit of height. And you also start off with your wrench. You can sort of side strafe or circle strafe, and you also start out with the pistol here. Now, as soon as you get new weapons, you see that sort of screen, and if you press the preview button, it will actually show you sort of a small animated video clip with a sort of instruction. And the constructo weapons in this game are different from the other weapons in that they have mods, basically. So this is the sort of introduction to mods. The pistol is the one you start with, then there's, I think this is a shotgun or something, and then the bomb glove. But yeah, if you buy the bomb glove, you can continue. Well, you can continue without it. You can basically beat most of the game with the sort of normal weapons. But yeah, here's another mechanic which is super important to this game. It's as soon as you bring up the weapons menu, the game pauses. So you will never get punished for switching weapons or going into the menu. And this also means that they can have a bunch of different weapons, which is sort of the core part of the game, because it's mostly about fighting, really. So this, you basically bring up the menu, and then you use the analog stick to basically select one of 8 weapons, and then you can press the shoulder buttons to bring up 2 more menus. So you can basically have 24 different weapons, though I don't think there's more than 20. I don't know really. I think I only have like 19 or 17 or something. But yeah, here's another part of the sort of first level with Ratchet that again shows off the central theme of the time puzzles. Well, they're not puzzles really, they're just things that happen and you have to adapt to them. But I think again it's really cool way of setting up the mechanic. So here is where you get your first constructor mod. It's not skippable, and you will always pick it up while playing the level, basically. So if you go into accept, you will see your weapon here. So there are different triggers. There's pull, there's full auto, and there's charge, I think, which basically does more damage as you charge it up. Then you have coil, blast, and something else. I think they just do different types of damage or something. I'm actually not quite sure what the differences are here, because it's pretty much not explained at all. Some weapons have bigger explosions or bigger spreads of the shotgun, for instance, as mods. I will show you some more weapons later. But yeah, this is the first part with the constructor weapons. And then you jump along, and then you save a small dude at the end. Here is just another demo. Obviously the market for this game is not the super hardcore games or gamers. This isn't really a hard game, and the way they make it easy is basically through weapon design, because nearly all of the weapons either have such a big AoE that you basically don't have to aim them, or they have some sort of auto aim that just makes sure that the weapons will always hit what you're aiming at, basically, because there's also a target or a sort of crosshair thingy. I'm not sure if you saw it because it's not as obvious with the glove. Yeah, there it is. So it snaps to enemies, and let's say you had your crosshair on an enemy over here. Whoops, that was wrong. And he was running off to the left. If you had sort of the rocket launcher, for instance, it would actually predict the enemy's movement and hit where it was running. So the weapons themselves are really clever. They're a smart way of making sure that you will be able to use you will be able to use your favorite weapon, And this level up mechanic also makes sure that the weapons you're using the most will also be the strongest. Now, obviously, weapons you get later in the game will have a stronger level 1. And unless you play the New Game Plus mode, you won't be able to go beyond level 5. They're so expensive, basically, that you won't be able to afford them. So yeah, as they level up, you get this sort of screen, which doesn't happen if you're still fighting, only if you're not shooting for a while, basically. So it upgrades, and you can see the stats sort of change. In a couple of the earlier games, you could actually see the specific value, like the damage value. And every time you level up, you also get a full refill of the weapon. When you go from level 5 to level 6, which is the Omega upgrade, the weapons also tend to get sort of specific extras, like a cluster bomb instead of a standard bomb and stuff like that, or more missiles or better homing. The game also tends to reward exploration. In this case, you can see down here at the right side, there's a gold bolt. And the gold bolts tend to be more about exploration, because as you can see here, once you've actually found it, it's really easy to get. Some of the later ones are harder, obviously. This one is more of an introduction. You will also get, as you progress with the arena, which I will show you later, you will also get the treasure mapper, I think that's what it's called, which will show the gold bolts on your map as well as on the galaxy map, making sure that you will be able to come back and get everything you missed the first time through. So the next sort of thing you can pick up, I don't really want to call them power-ups, but I suppose that's what they are, is the Sony here, which are some form of timekeepers, I suppose, which you use to upgrade your ship. I wouldn't mind it as much if they were optional, because they're honestly quite boring to get. What happens here is you run back to your ship and you fix it with the first 3. The level design is also really clever. Wait, I will do that later. I will go back and talk a bit more about the Sony here. Because what tends to happen is that you will be required to farm the Sony, basically, because some of the new levels will require you to have a certain amount of Sony, and if you didn't pick them up the first time, you will have to go to sort of specific maps to farm them, because you need a specific amount. And they're not just like going from 3 to 4 either, it's every 3 Sony, which means that if you play through the game fast and don't pick them up, you will basically, I think at one point I had to get 5 of them, which is quite annoying, because you can basically see the next area you're supposed to go to, you just can't get there. But yeah, here is the sort of level design. This is the map. If I did have the treasure mapper, you would see the gold bolt. I think it's over here. Yeah. But the sort of best part, in my opinion, about the Ratchet Clank games is that they have a sort of open level design. Obviously, this is the first map, it's not open. But what tends to happen is that they have a sort of starting point. In this case, it's actually below here. I just paused the video. And then you go along one path, and then you have a teleporter at the end, teleporting you back to your ship. And then if you want to, you can take another path from the on the same level, or you can go into your ship and go to a different map. Some of the earlier games, I think it's the second one, actually did this really well, where you could pretty much explore as much as you wanted to, but eventually you'd run into a sort of puzzle or something that required a gadget that you could only find on another level. But the usage of either the teleporters, and there's also sort of taxi ships which just take you along a scenic route back to the start, and essentially they also have levels which just have a level design that allows you to run in a circle basically and pick stuff up. So in this case you fix your ship and everyone is happy. So the first upgrade is just interplanetary travel. Then you're allowed to have better gas and better weapons and force fields and stuff like that. Yeah, that is it. So the next part is the arena, which tends to be really no platforming and just fighting. There has pretty much been an arena in every Ratchet Clank game, I think. At least except for Deadlocked, which is basically just an arena the entire game. But the arena challenges are pretty cool in my opinion, because they essentially switch up the game. So as you can see down here, there are different descriptions for the different challenges. So this one is don't get hit. This is survive for 3 minutes. Defeat 100 before the timer runs out. A random weapon every 20 seconds. This is really hard if you've only been using like a couple of weapons, because all of your other ones will be shit. And so you will pretty much have to go back here once you've upgraded stuff, or you don't buy weapons you don't intend on using. And then you have a couple of bosses. The second one, the hard one, in my opinion at least, yeah, this one is more like a sort of tower defense map or something like that. Basically what happens if you have the barrier at the bottom there, and you only get to use the shotgun, and you have to kill all of these bots here. Now obviously if you have your constructor mods set to something like the tightest sort of cone that you're able to achieve, this one will be extremely difficult, but in this case I have the widest spread possible, and I've also got it at level 3, so it's pretty easy. Then this is another challenge. I will be showing off most of the weapons here. I will try to make this quick because I'm only 5:40 into my video footage here, while I'm 18 minutes into the demo. So this one will probably be longer because I actually have something like 15 minutes of video. But yeah, number 1 is your fairly standard rocket launcher. No, it wasn't. Okay, it was the Groovitron, which makes enemies dance basically. This weapon here is the Rhino. Rip ya a new one. To find this you will also have to do sort of collection. You have to find 10 different weapon parts, and then you buy the weapon. I think... Okay, I didn't quite edit this as much as I thought. I will be showing off more weapons, I promise. But yeah, as you can see here, these rockets I think are part of the level 6 upgrade. The regular bullets is just how the weapon works from level 1 to 5. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's how it is. Yeah, this is the Rift Ripper. It's basically a big AoE thingy that does damage to anything that comes close. Again, it's really easy to hit with. All you have to do is get enemies within a certain AoE of the weapon, and it works. And then you have these sort of shurikens which bounce around, which also auto-aim, and they can hit the same enemy several times. As you can see, the cloud is basically following him around. Then you have your net, which will basically stun enemies and lock them into the net there while taking damage. Oh yeah, I killed him a bit too fast. But this is another sort of boss. You will run into these guys several times during the game. Let's see if I show off more weapons. I think I do. I haven't watched this video in a couple of days. I actually edited it a while ago. Yeah, here's your rocket launcher. And these enemies also go into bubbles. As you can see here, there's R2 plus square icon, which means that you basically pull out a fuse here, which is also used in the platforming mechanics, which is a pretty cool integration. There's also another boss where you use the wrench to sort of unscrew shields, I think, or something. Unfortunately, I didn't get footage of that, and I didn't want to go back and do it because it's several hours into the game. But yeah, so they sort of integrate the wrench into the combat as well, which is a nice touch. I'm not entirely sold on it because I think how they use it is pretty weird, and there's also just these enemies, and there's shield guys. Basically you can pull their shields away from them and they won't pick it back up. They also throw bombs which you can pick up and throw back. It's another arena challenge entirely based around that mechanic. But yeah, so we have your rocket launcher. Let's see what else. Spiral of Death. It's basically a sort of boomerang. I'm not really impressed by it. You have your shotgun. This Mr. Zircon basically gives you a friend flying around shooting at things. This is a big shotgun essentially. It also has a timing minigame. There's basically a bar going across the screen, and if you press it when it's at the top, it does more damage. This one is a weird twister thing, I think. Yeah, exactly. I'm not impressed with that one either because I don't like using the 6-axis mechanic. I think it's pretty weird. I just want to hold the controller in my hands. Plasma Striker is basically a sniper weapon. It's the only one you can zoom with, and it's also the only one that doesn't have any sort of lock-on. But yeah, as you can see, I could fire it from my hip, so it doesn't really matter. The weapons are really cool, and I really like how they've integrated them into the sort of difficulty, just by making sure that most of them do AoE and things like that. So the focus isn't on aiming in this game. It's more on dodging and picking the right weapon for the situation and things like that. And again, it's not supposed to be a hard game. So it works really well. Now, this is one of the parts which I don't like. Basically, you will be playing as Clank several times throughout the game in the Great Clock here. And this, as you can see, is in Clank's subconscious, which basically tend to be sort of flashbacks or something, I suppose. But what they come out as is a collection of minigames, which one, aren't especially fun, and two, take a lot of time. Like this part of the game here is basically it's not skippable, and it shows up once you reach a certain part of the game, and you will have to play as Clank for 30 or 40 minutes uninterrupted, just playing minigames, jumping around, doing puzzles, things like that, which I think is really weird. And the biggest problem here is actually what you're selling. Like if I go back to Photoshop and selling. So the question is, if you're buying an action platformer with the focus on action, do you really want to do platforming for 30 or 40 minutes without actually having a weapon at all? Because in my opinion, if you're doing something like a minigame, if you're keeping it below a couple of minutes, for instance, like let's say you have a minigame, there are many of them in the Ratchet & Clank series, where you have to open doors, for instance. There are a ton of different hacking minigames. but you will only ever be doing them a couple of minutes at a time, and you will only ever be doing them while being able to sort of abort them, going somewhere else, shooting your gun, and doing what you want to. Eventually, sure, you will have to do the hacking, but the longer your minigame is, or if you chain several of them together, the more you will have to make sure that the player has something interesting to do while playing them. Because in this case, basically what you're doing is rotating the world and holding down R1 or whatever to fire constantly while ridding the world of these anomalies. You're basically fixing time or something like that. So as you're doing this, the world, like the world around you, doesn't move like you'd expect from an action game. You're basically just standing around, shooting things, rotating, whatever. And there are also sort of unskippable introduction thingies, which if you escape, like if you cancel this and then go back, you will have to start over all the way from the beginning, all again. And basically is this: if you're selling an action game, everything that is not an action game, or it's not part of the core mechanics, has to be twice as important, either to the story or the characters or something like the central part of the plot or world building or whatever. Like, it has to be super important. This stuff, it doesn't really change anything in the world itself. If you played through the game and this wasn't in it at all, you wouldn't miss it. It's in the game, and I actually think it's the worst part of the game. This entire sort of cycle when you're playing as Clank is I'm not sure if I have a word for it, but it's the part that is most likely for you to put the controller down and never pick it up again. Basically quitting the game because you don't want to play this. This is not the game you bought. So if you're not giving the player what you sold them with a box art, for instance, or with a preview, most reviewers just play a couple of hours and they will not get to this part, so they will not have it to complain about, basically. So yeah, I think this is really weird design. Maybe they wanted to split it up into several segments, but that's not how it came out, and I think it's pretty weird, to be honest. I mean, even looking at it, it's a world that rotates and you shoot stuff. Yay. So happy. Such a challenge. Wow. Yeah, here's also another part. So, I'm not sure if I'm counting. Yeah. So in this case, you get the press square to deflect projectiles. Yay! Okay, one down. You do it again, and the tower sort of becomes a platform instead. Another thing to mention, as Clank, you also only have 4 health at any given point. It's your max health, which means that you will have to do the platforming bit there pretty well to be able to even reach this point. Guess what? More deflecting. So you've also already shown that you're able to do it 3 times without failing 4 times, basically. And then you get to do it again 6 times. And this time you have health on the sides. So it's on the same difficulty level. You just have to show that you're able to do it more. Because in later segments of the Great Clock segments with Clank, you will have to do this a lot. So many times, and I hate it. There are a type of flying enemies which take something like 4 reflected projectiles to kill, and they show up in packs of 2 or 3. So you'll basically be standing still, hitting your attack button every time they shoot at you, and sometimes they will choose not to shoot at you for several seconds in a row, and eventually it becomes tedious. But yeah, there's also this sort of, I call it gadget puzzling, because everything that's not a weapon is referred to as a gadget. So you have your hover boots, which makes you go faster. You have your hook shot, which pulls you towards things, sort of like the demon pull, I suppose, in Devil May Cry. Then you have your, I'm not sure if it's called the Omni Soaker in this game, but it has been in other games, which basically sucks up fluids and then lets you spray them at things. There's water, which scares away these angry critter thingies. There's oil, which lets you manipulate rusty things, I suppose. Then there's the jello stuff, which makes these angry things attack enemies. And I forgot something, but whatever. But yeah, so this is basically just about moving slowly and figuring out how to get around these angry things, because they eat you if you stand in them. Like, they're pretty cool. I don't mind this at all, because you're still allowed to basically you're still allowed to jump off and shoot things if you want to. They're not gonna die, but you're able to do so if you want to. So this is a better sort of tie-in to the core mechanics. Unlike the Clank part, where you're just running around with an entirely different character doing different stuff that basically has no impact. In this case, you're just using a different set of tools to progress along the same path as you would if you were fighting. Here's another part. The space fighting has also been in a ton of different Ratchet & Clank games. So basically what you're doing is you're flying around a constricted arena in a sort of 2D space, shooting at ships which fly around you. So you're basically just turning, aiming at things, turning, and then shooting more and more and more until you win. Sure, at the beginning it could be hard, because I can see how you're potentially dying. But again, it's a really boring part of the game. Sure, it ties in pretty well with the game in that you're moving between different planets. This is also a sort of exploration part, because as you can see here, there are big planets, which are generally the main storyline, and then there are smaller planets, which are more of a sort of Mario Galaxy, I suppose. Tiny planets that give you either Sony for ship upgrades, golden bolts. I think it's pretty much it. So they're basically just places you have to go to farm ship upgrades, because the game is not nice enough to give them to you by playing the game normally. Again, sure, I can see why they did it. Some of the games actually have 3D space mechanics, but in those games they had to make the enemies smart enough to fly into your sights, because otherwise it would be too hard. So I can see why they went back to the sort of 2D game. And there, yeah, I will go back to the space map just to talk about it for a bit. The space combat, sure, I can see why they did it, but I'm not going to say it's super good or bad. It just is. I can accept the fighting part, but I think the ship upgrades are boring. Here we go. Yeah, as you can see here, the big things are sort of the main gameplay, and then the small ones are the upgrades. I can click and it goes better. These ones are the Rhino parts, gold bolts. Oh yeah, it's the Constructo mods. Those are also available on the planets. And then you have your Sony. And as you can see, the unfinished thingies have circles around them. So you basically go to the planet. I think I'm showing it off pretty well here. And there's basically a linear path of platforms. Whoops, I cut off a bit too much there maybe. But yeah, so you basically just go through to the end on a linear path. These can be pretty challenging, and I really like the sort of round world mechanic because it lets you see things that are looking really close while being pretty far away, and you're unable to get to them. It also has a really cool system where instead of having a map, you just zoom out and you're able to rotate the entire world, because obviously it's so small that it doesn't have as high a poly count as the bigger levels, and they also tend to reuse the same sort of assets over and over again. So I think these are pretty cool. If it wasn't because you had to farm them so much, I think these would be even better. Because in some of the earlier games, you would basically have to do fighting on these sort of small round worlds where the ground would just be flat, which tended to lead you into having to sort of fly around the entire world looking for enemies, because there was also always one hiding somewhere. So these are better than they were in that game. I don't remember which one it was, but yeah, I like them. They're pretty cool. And there, as you can see, I thought it was a sort of bounce pad, but it was a teleporter instead. So I'm just running along, doing things, shooting stuff, gaining bolts. Oh yeah, here's another thing. Once you finish the game, you will be able to start over on New Game Plus, where you will be able to get a lot of bolts. Because as you can see here, there's a multiplier below your bolts. What this means is that if you kill one enemy, I think you will get one multiplier. If you kill another two, you will get 2 times 2. Maybe it's something, whatever. It's something like that. And if you get hit, your multiplier will go down. But I think you can have something like times 10. I haven't actually paid attention to this, so I'm not sure what the maximum is. I think it's times 10, which means that as long as you're not taking damage, you will rake in the bolts and you will be able to buy more upgrades. So when you're playing it on the higher difficulties, well, it's not harder, obviously, but if you're playing it on New Game Plus, the difficulty isn't so much about fighting the enemies as it is about taking no damage at all, which is also a pretty cool challenge. Obviously, you will get even angrier for taking minimal amounts of damage, because what tends to happen is you're doing something stupid like this, using your rift weapon, and it doesn't kill an enemy that you thought it would kill, so you just run straight into them. And then at the end you get your Sony and everyone lives happily ever after. And your ship gets a minor upgrade that doesn't matter. Because after like level... I think it's after you have something like 20, you only get more shields and more damage and stuff like that. So here I'm showing off the sort of menu. This is also later in the game. So I have all of the constructor upgrades. Yeah, so you have pull, you have your auto fire, you have your charge, you have blast, which gives you protons, and then thermal laser. Yeah, again, I don't know what they mean. You have ricochet, so it bounces, it sets things on fire, or it explodes, I think. A cool thing is also that the look of the weapon changes depending on your upgrades. Sure, it's a cool bit of modular design when it comes to the weapons. I like it. You also have a bunch of different paints. There's also a bunch of different sort of stuff here in the menus. As you can see, if you go into the Aphelion or whatever, you can see your upgrades. Yeah, so this one is the last one I think that matters. Maybe the 24 one as well. The reflector, which allows you to go through laser beams. then you also have your extras. So the skill points are pretty weird in that once you've finished them, you will show the description basically. So you will only know how to do them once you've done them, which is pretty weird. So I haven't got a lot of skill points because I haven't been bothered to go to a FAQ or something and look up what they actually require. And the cheats unlock with skill points. They're not something that impact the gameplay, so they're not cheats as such. They're still pretty cool in my opinion. So you can change the look of your ship. The glove, I'm not sure what this does. The altered arsenal just changes the size of the weapons. Then you have concept arts and skins, which unlock with gold bolts, I think. But yeah, there are a bunch of different weapon sizes, and I will be showing them off. But yeah, as you can see here, gold bolts, you get a bunch of different skins, which again don't impact gameplay. And I didn't have all of them here. And here you can see the big weapons. So this is the pistol that you're starting with. And the Rhino looks like this, which in my opinion is pretty cool. Any weapon which allows you to have weapons that are this big must be good on some level. Obviously I've played a bunch of different Ratchet & Clanks because otherwise I wouldn't be able to reference them so much. I think I own like 4 of them. Again, the fighting is the best part because that's what they've been focusing on in the newer games. As they get further and further away from the combat parts, the game gets worse and worse. I'd still recommend it. I think the second one is probably my favorite. And then there's this Crack in Time one. Stupidly enough, I didn't show the good parts of the Clank. What are they called? Yeah, the Clank segments when he goes to the Great Clock and fixes things. They actually have a really cool puzzle. I guess I'll sort of draw it instead. So basically what you have is at the start you have 4 or between 2 and 4 platforms, and then you have sort of a bunch of switches. So as you step on one of these, you can record what you're doing, and you can once you start recording on another platform, that one will basically start doing what it's doing. So let's say you have a switch up here, you have a switch up here which has a door around it, you have an elevator up here. So basically what you will be doing is you pick your first one and you run up here and you wait for a while, and then you step on the switch which opens the door up here. Boom boom. Then you go to your next one over here, you go up here, and since that guy is opening the door for you, you will be able to go in and step on the switch here, which brings down the elevator. So then the next guy will run up here, wait for the elevator to go down, and ride the elevator up, and everyone lives happily ever after, because there are 2 buttons up here. So let's say you don't have this one. That means that you go back to the platform at the bottom here, and then you play this one again. So you go up here, you open the door to let that guy in, and then as he steps on the plate, you will move to the elevator, you will ride it up, and you will press these switches. Then you go to this guy again. So you go in, you let the elevator down, and then once these guys are both standing on it, you raise the elevator back up again. And these puzzles can get pretty hairy actually. They are sort of tricky. I think they're the coolest part of the Clank bit, and I'm stupid for not including them in the video. But if you want to check it out, I think there's likely a YouTube video showing it. And if not, I will be able to upload them in a later video, just to show you what they're doing. They're pretty cool in my opinion, and easily one of the best puzzle segments in all of the Ratchet & Clank games. So this has been the design of Ratchet & Clank, mostly a Crack in Time. I've been Jonas, and thank you for watching.